Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is Pro-Revenge Story. As a bit of background, me and my 3 roommates moved into a housing community that is basically just a bunch of cookie-cutter townhomes. All of these homes have garages that open onto streets that wind through the community, this is important later, with your front door opening to a path on the other side of your house. There are also some free parking spots on the edge of the community where there are no houses. When we first moved in, we quickly found out that parking could be a bit of a pain during the day, especially when people had guests during the weekend. Now, my roommates and I admittedly have more cars than the average family. Because we usually have to commute for work, we each have one. We try to make parking easier by using the garage, but we all have tons of sporting equipment, so we can usually only get one car in the garage. When all the parking and all the free spots is full, we just park our cars right up against the garage and leave them there during the day or overnight. We'd seen other neighbors do it, and it still left ample room for people driving on the street to get by. Well, one day, crappy neighbor come up while my roommates and I are in the garage organizing some stuff and tells us that we can't park there overnight as it's against community rules. Before we had a chance to respond, he added, "And if you do it again, I will personally make sure you're towed." His first comment was pretty reasonable. We'd just moved in and didn't know that rule. But his second comment really just made him sound like an ass and wasn't necessary. One of my roommates simply responded that we didn't know as we'd just moved in and we wouldn't park there overnight anymore. Well, crappy neighbor, clearly trying to assert his dominance, responded with, "Good, you better not because I'll be watching." Well, from then on, we did follow those rules. If we parked in front of our garage during the day, we would make sure to move before we went to sleep. This worked out for a while until one faithful day. One of my roommates stopped by quickly after work to grab some dinner and clothes before heading to his girlfriend's. This was around 7 p.m., so he just parked up against the garage as it would be quicker than the parking spaces. Plus, it was early enough that he didn't think he'd get towed. Around 8 p.m., he went to head out and his car was gone. Guess who was there, though? Crappy neighbor standing right outside. Immediately, he said to my roommates, "Told you you were going to get towed if you parked here again." SN and my roommate argued for a bit before my roommate came back inside and calls the car lot. Well, it ends up they're closed, so he'll have to get his car in the morning. The kicker? They're going to charge him an overnight fee. All in all, it comes out to $500, which isn't a small amount of money for us. This neighbor has been an ass to us since we moved in, and even though it wasn't my car that was towed, I took this personally. To make sure we didn't get towed again, we decided to read the community rules in low. And behold, we found out that the street in front of the garage is actually considered a fire lane and no one is supposed to park there at any point during the day. Between crappy neighbor treating us like crap and the fact that we could get him yelling at his wife every night. Not a big detail to the story, but just wanted to say to add to my point that this guy just sucked. I start to plan my revenge. Since quarantine started, I've been able to work from home, and my desk conveniently looks out onto the street between the houses. This means that I can clearly see crappy neighbor's garage. I start to take notice of when he parks his car out in front of his garage. For about 2 weeks, I noticed that he would come home around 1 p.m. and leave again at 2 p.m. On the 3rd week, I decided I would begin the revenge. On Monday, true to his schedule, he stopped by around 1. After about 10 minutes, I gave the tow company a call and said that he was parked in the fire lane and if they could come and remove his car. 20 minutes later, a tow truck rolled up, hooked his car up, and towed it off. About 15 minutes later, crappy neighbor came out and I could hear him start to yell back into his house, presumably at his wife. He then left and didn't come back until later that evening after he'd gotten his car. Now it was funny to do this, and I made sure to send snaps to my roommates who don't work from home, but I wasn't done yet. See, this jackass apparently didn't learn the first time, because literally the next day he parks in front of his garage again. What do? Well, the exact same thing as the day before, of course. Again, SN come out, realizes his car is gone, yells at his wife, and then goes to get it. Now, after this time, he is a bit smarter and parks in an actual spot before going in to get his lunch or whatever it is he does there midday. He does this for about 2 weeks before he decides that it's okay to park in front of his garage again. Well, who is still sitting at their desk every day and notices this immediately? Well, me, of course. And being the concerned resident that I am, I immediately call the tow company and off his car goes again. And again, this is met with yelling. I wish that this had a more satisfying ending, but after this 3rd time, I decided I would stop because I genuinely felt bad for his wife, who he seemed to do most of the yelling at, as if it was her fault that he was a dumbass. What I can tell you is that it definitely cost him over $1,000. If he hadn't gotten my roommate's car towed, then we wouldn't have ever found that fun little rule. The best part was that a number of my neighbors would have their cars parked there at the same time, and they'd never have their cars towed, which made it all the better when his was. We have had a number of other encounters that with him in the time since this happened, and I have another story that involves the actual HOA that I'll probably write later. That one is still ongoing though, so we'll see how it ends up. The next one is an entitled people story. I need to tell you about the most satisfying case of malicious compliance I've ever experienced. And it all started with a woman who thought she could control property she didn't own. About 5 years ago, my wife and I bought our dream property. It was this beautiful piece of land at the end of a long private road, about a quarter mile from the main street. The property had been in the same family for decades, and when the elderly owner passed away, his kids just wanted to sell it quickly. We got an amazing deal, and part of that deal included full ownership of the private road leading to our house. This wasn't some shared driveway situation. We owned the entire road, from where it connected to the public street all the way to our property. It was clearly marked on the deed, we paid taxes on it, and it was 100% ours. Now here's where things get interesting. About halfway down our private road, there was this housing development that had been built maybe 10 years earlier. They had their own entrance from a different street, their own roads, their own everything. They also had an HOA, which I knew from the research we did before buying. But here's the crucial part. Our property was not part of that HOA. We weren't even close to being part of it. Our land predated their development by about 40 years, and we had our own separate access. We had zero obligation to their HOA, and frankly, that was one of the reasons we loved the property so much. For the first few months, everything was perfect. We moved in, started fixing up the house, and enjoyed our privacy. Then we met her, the HOA president. Let's call her Karen, because if there was ever a person who embodied that stereotype, it was her. It started small. She showed up at our door one Saturday morning with a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She introduced herself as the HOA president and started talking about how we needed to pay our annual dues. I politely explained that we weren't part of the HOA. Our property wasn't in the development. We had our own access road, and we'd specifically verified this with our real estate attorney before closing. Her smile got tighter. She insisted that everyone in the area was part of the HOA and that we must have been mistaken. I showed her our property deed, pointed out the boundaries, and explained again that we weren't members. She left, but I could tell she wasn't happy about it. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next few months, Karen kept trying different tactics. She sent us violation notices for things that weren't even on our property. Our mailbox was the wrong color, apparently. Never mind that it was a standard black mailbox on our own land, nowhere near their development. We left our trash cans visible from the road. Again, our private road, our property. She even complained that our lawn wasn't maintained to HOA standards. We had 3 acres of partially wooded land. We weren't running a golf course. Every single time, I calmly explained that we weren't HOA members and she had no authority over our property. I even had our real estate attorney send her a formal letter explaining the situation. That seemed to make things worse. The real problem started when she began obsessing over our road. She claimed that because the HOA residents could theoretically see our private road from some of their properties, it needed to meet HOA standards for appearance and maintenance. This was completely insane. It was our road. We maintained it just fine. It was gravel, well graded and perfectly functional, but it wasn't paved, and apparently that offended her HOA sensibilities. She started sending us certified letters demanding we pave the road. Then she sent notices saying we needed to install HOA-approved lighting along the road. Then it was about the lack of proper signage. Each time I responded the same way. Not your property, not your business, go away. But here's where she crossed the line from annoying to criminal. One morning I was driving down our road to head to work and I heard this horrible pop and felt the car lurch. I pulled over immediately and got out to find my front tire completely shredded, not just flat destroyed. When I looked at the road behind me, I saw them. Dozens of small spike strips scattered across the gravel, the kind that are designed to puncture tires. I was furious. I carefully photographed everything, called the police, and then called a tow truck for my car. While I was waiting, I walked back along the road and found even more spike strips. Someone had scattered them across several hundred feet of our private road, carefully hidden in the gravel so they'd be nearly impossible to spot while driving. The police came out and took a report. They collected the spike strips as evidence and told me this was definitely criminal mischief. possibly even something more serious since it was designed to cause vehicle damage. I gave them my suspicions about who might be responsible, along with the entire history of harassment from Karen. Here's where I got lucky. One of my neighbors, an older guy who lived on the main road, had a security camera that covered the entrance to our private road. He'd installed it after some package thefts in the area. When the police asked, he checked his footage, and there it was, clear as day. Karen, at 3 in the morning 2 days earlier, walking down our road with a bag, stopping every 20 feet or so to scatter something on the ground. The police paid Karen a visit. She initially denied everything, but when they told her about the video evidence, she changed her story. According to the police report, she claimed she was trying to enforce HOA rules about unauthorized traffic on community roads. She actually told the police that our private road was part of the HOA common area, and she had the right to control access to it. The police explained to her in no uncertain terms that she had committed a crime and that our road was definitely not HOA property. They gave her a citation for criminal mischief and told her she'd be hearing from the prosecutor's office. But here's where the malicious compliance comes in, and this is the part that still makes me smile. After the police visit and the criminal charges, I started doing some research into property law and my rights as the owner of a private road. That's when I discovered something interesting. About a dozen families from the HOA development had been using my private road as a shortcut to get to a main road on the other side of our property. I'd noticed the occasional car I didn't recognize, but I'd never really thought much about it. Our road connected to a small public road on the far end of our property that gave easier access to the highway. For these HOA residents, using our road saved them about 10 minutes compared to going out through their main entrance. Now, I'm generally a live and let live kind of person. I didn't care if a few neighbors used the road occasionally. It wasn't hurting anything. But after Karen scattered spikes on my property and tried to destroy my vehicle, I decided it was time to exercise my full property rights. I called a fencing company and got quotes for a gate. Not just any gate, a serious heavy-duty gate with a lock and private property no trespassing signs. I also called my insurance company to report the spike incident and asked about liability. They were very clear. If I was allowing public use of my private road, I could be held liable for any accidents or injuries that occurred on it. Given that someone had already scattered tire spikes on it, they strongly recommended I either get serious liability coverage or restrict access. The liability coverage would have cost thousands per year. The choice was obvious. I had the gate installed at the entrance to our private road, right where it met the public street. It was a beautiful gate, actually, all black metal with a secure lock. I put up multiple signs. Private road, property of our names, no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted. I also installed a camera system covering the gate, just in case anyone decided to damage it. The gate went up on a Friday. By Monday morning, my phone was ringing off the hook. It started with angry calls from HOA residents demanding I remove the gate. They claimed they had a right to use the road. I politely informed each caller that they had no such right, that this was private property, and that after someone had criminally vandalized my road and destroyed my vehicle, I was no longer comfortable allowing public access. Then Karen called. She was absolutely furious, practically screaming into the phone about how I was being unreasonable and vindictive. I let her rant for a minute, then calmly explained that this was actually her fault. If she hadn't scattered spikes on my private road and forced me to involve the police and my insurance company, I would have happily continued letting people use it. But since she had made it a liability issue, and since she had demonstrated that people were willing to vandalize my property, I had no choice but to restrict access. She tried to argue that the HOA had an easement or a right-of-way. I asked her to provide documentation of this easement. She couldn't because it didn't exist. She threatened to sue. I told her to go ahead, and that my attorney would be happy to countersue for the cost of my destroyed tire, the tow truck, the gate installation, and emotional distress. The fallout was beautiful to watch. Within a week, I had a delegation from the HOA board show up at my door. Not including Karen this time, just 3 other board members. They were much more polite and reasonable. They explained that several families had been relying on the shortcut through my road for years, even before we bought the property. The previous owner had been fine with it. They asked if we could work out some kind of agreement. I was honest with them. I explained that I'd been fine with it too, until their HOA president had criminally vandalized my property and tried to destroy my vehicle. I showed them all the violation notices Karen had sent me, the harassment, the certified letters demanding I pave my own private road. I explained that my insurance company had made it very clear that allowing public use of a private road created significant liability, especially after the spike incident. They understood. They weren't happy, but they understood. They asked if there was any amount of money that would change my mind. I told them that no amount of money would offset the liability risk and the hassle of dealing with their HOA president. One of them quietly mentioned that Karen might not be the HOA president much longer. That turned out to be true. Within a month, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Karen had been voted out as HOA president. Apparently, the families who'd lost their convenient shortcut were pretty angry with her. They'd learned about the whole situation, how she'd been harassing us for months, how she'd scattered the spikes, how her criminal actions had directly led to me gating off the road. But it got better. The criminal charges stuck. Karen ended up pleading guilty to criminal mischief and had to pay restitution for my tire, the tow truck, and even a portion of the gate installation cost. The prosecutor argued that since her criminal actions had necessitated me securing my property, she should bear some of the cost. The judge agreed. She also got a restraining order. She wasn't allowed to contact us or come onto our property. Any HOA business that somehow involved our property had to go through another board member. The new HOA president reached out a few months later very politely to ask if I'd consider opening the road again now that Karen was gone. I declined. By that point, we'd gotten used to the privacy and security of the gate. No random cars driving past our house. No concerns about liability. No HOA drama. It was exactly what we'd wanted when we bought the property in the first place. Besides, the gate had an unexpected benefit. Property values in the HOA development apparently took a small hit because of the less convenient access. Meanwhile, our property value went up. Turns out, secluded private estate with gated road was a selling point, not a drawback. Not that we were planning to sell, but it was nice to know. The best part, every single day when I drove through that gate, I thought about how this whole situation was entirely Karen's own fault. She was so obsessed with control, so determined to force us into her HOA, so convinced that she had authority over property that wasn't hers, that she'd committed a crime. And that crime had given me every justification I needed to do exactly what she'd been most afraid of. Treat my private road like the private property it actually was. She'd wanted to control access to my road. She'd scattered spikes to enforce her imaginary authority. And in response, I'd exercised my real legal authority to control access completely. I'd done exactly what she'd been trying to prevent people from doing. Used my road privately for my own purposes only, with no consideration for what the HOA wanted. That's malicious compliance at its finest. She demanded I follow her rules. I followed the actual rules property law, which gave me complete control over my own private road. And it was her own criminal actions that gave me both the justification and the motivation to do it. The last I heard, Karen had moved out of the neighborhood entirely. I imagine it was pretty uncomfortable living there after everything that happened. The gate's still there, though. Still locked, still private, still exactly what she tried to prevent, and I couldn't be happier about it. The first one is a petty revenge story. Might be a little long, so I apologize. So for a bit of context, I, 24F, used to work at a sandwich shop named after a public transportation in my hometown when I was 19. My manager and I were working a shift together one day, and the lunch rush had just ended, so she was mostly confined to the back, balancing the safe and washing dishes while I handled cleaning the front of house in the line. I saw a woman approaching the store and quickly made my way behind the line and washed up. She came in with her phone pressed to her ear, and I was already on edge because of that alone. Customers who refuse to get off the phone to communicate their order are always difficult to deal with. I welcomed her and I asked what I could get for her. She said a turkey sandwich, very curtly, then turned back to her phone. The entire time I tried to take her order, she would say rude, snarky comments on my occupation, and to just make the D at MN sandwich. How hard can that be? I swear you're all so stupid it's hard to believe you have jobs. I was irritated but continued smiling, but I could no longer force it to meet my eyes. I asked her what dressings she would like, and she said mustard, and refused to answer if she wanted regular, spicy, and honey mustard. So I just put regular mustard on it after she angrily told me to stop asking stupid questions. I finished the sandwich, rang up her sandwich and drink, and I hoped she would just leave after she was done. Nope. She finished 2/3 of her sandwich and came stomping back to my register, slammed the sandwich on the counter, and started non-stop ringing the bell to get my attention. I set down the prep I was doing and put on the best smile I could muster and went back to my register. She yelled at me that I would remake her sandwich for free because she clearly asked for honey mustard and I put the wrong mustard on her sandwich to spite her. My manager butted in, having heard everything from me making this lady's sandwich to that point. She came up behind me and saw the woman had eaten the majority of the sandwich. She told the woman that she seemed happy with the sandwich and refused the remake. The woman then picked up her sandwich and threw it at me. Luckily, it only got on my jeans and apron, but my manager said she needed to leave or she would call the cops. The lady continued to argue that now her sandwich was ruined and we needed to remake it for her. My manager pushed me behind her and told me to go finish my prep. I'm only just on the other side of the wall and hear everything. My manager's boyfriend was a cop, so she pulled out her phone and called him and started telling him how one of her employees had just been assaulted by a horrible customer. I had met him several times and he was an awesome guy. Well, this scared off the customer and we went about with our day-to-day duties. I ended up quitting after a few months when one of my coworkers thought it would be funny to touch me with a cookie tray she had just pulled out of the oven. Fast forward to a couple months ago, I go to that same shop because I was in the area and a sandwich sounded good. I did a double take when I saw that same woman behind the counter, and she seemed to recognize me because she looked like shocked Pikachu. We go through the motions of making my order, and at the register, I gave her a big smile as I popped a $5 bill in the tip cup and say, "I hope you have a blessed day." She went red hot in the face when I did this and went to say something when my old assistant manager came out front. He saw me and got excited and started talking about his promotion and wife. When the woman went into the back, my friend started laughing about how he could hear the petty in my voice from the back, that he had to see the look on my face and that our old manager would have been proud. My manager now works a decent paying job and married her cop boyfriend. I work a decent job as well and luckily don't have to deal with customers at this one. As I would have loved to do something truly petty, I refuse to stoop to her level. I've heard to kill him with kindness my entire life when someone wrongs me, so I decided to try that route, especially since I know how rough it can be to work in customer service and didn't want to cause this woman the same level of stress and anxiety she caused me. The next one is a malicious compliance story. A bit of background. I used to work at a popular grocery store that's known for rolling over for customers. I started working for this grocery store during my gap year before college. I wanted to save up some money before taking on the crippling burden that is student loans. When I started, the job was easy enough and the vast amount of people were kind. I didn't have to deal with a lot of Karens, and the hours were flexible. I really enjoyed my coworkers and managers. Life seemed great. That is, until our department got a new boss. I don't know what it is about new bosses, but they always have to go on a power trip to consolidate power and to show everyone they mean business. Our Karen manager went around the department and started criticizing people for the stupidest things. Even if we were doing our job correctly, she would show up and tell us to work faster and we were stealing company time. We all hated her, but she is our boss, so we just tried to do what we were told. I pride myself on finding the quickest and most efficient way to do a job. Thanks for the upbringing, Mom. I applied this to any of my duties for the day. It just so happened that the end of the day was coming up and we had to return products that customers left behind. Non-perishable, of course. I was voluntold to go do it. This wasn't an issue as I had done this plenty of times before. I went about my task and finished in about 10 minutes. The second I got done, my KM called me into her office and the following conversation ensued. Karen manager. Close the door. Now, do you know why I called you in here? Me. No? Karen manager. I am trying to improve efficiency in the department, and you took way too long to do those go-backs. I won't tolerate people slacking off in my department, do you understand? Me. I wasn't slacking off, trying to defend myself. I was just cutting me off. She reiterated, Karen manager, do you understand? Knowing I was being railroaded, I just sighed and said yes. Karen manager. To ensure you don't slack off again, you are forbidden from doing any more go-backs. I don't care if the store manager tells you otherwise. This is my department, and you will do as I say. I'm the boss. I get a smile on my face as I realize what she just said. I nod my head and reply, Me, understood. I won't do go-backs no matter what. My Karen manager replied with an umbrage smile and said, Karen manager, good. Now go back to work and don't forget what I said. I'm the boss. I turned around so she couldn't see my crap-eating grin and said, Me, don't worry. Message received loud and clear. A few days go by without incident until I finally get a chance to put my malicious compliance into action. The front desk supervisor seems that the go-back card is full and asks me to return the products. I smile and say, Me, sorry, supervisor. Karen manager said I was wasting time and I am no longer allowed to return products. The supervisor gives me a weird look, but just shrugs and tells another coworker to do it instead. This cycle continues on for the next month. One day, the store manager happens to be manning the front desk. The end of the day rolls around and he looks at me and says, Store manager, hey OP, we have a lot of go-backs and I need you to return them. Me, sorry, store manager. I'm not allowed to do go-backs anymore on account of slacking off. Store manager looks frustrated and says, Store manager, I don't care if you are allowed to or not. I am telling you to take these back. Me. Sorry, store manager. Karen manager told me I am not to do any more go-backs no matter what, and I'd better follow her orders. Karen manager told me that this is her department and that she is the boss. Store manager looked pissed and stormed into the manager's office. A few minutes later, store manager called Karen manager to his office over the intercom. Karen manager came waddling out of her office and went into store manager's office. The door closed and we could all hear muffled yelling. After about 10 minutes, the door opened and Karen manager shuffled out. She glared daggers at me and told me to come to her office. I happily complied and said, "Yes, Karen manager. How can I be of assistance, Karen manager? You are allowed to do go-backs again." That is all I smirked and left her office, happy that I could put a Karen in her place. Update. I'm surprised a lot of people enjoyed my story. I will continue sharing stories from this job and a hospital I used to work at. Hope you all enjoy them. Update Part 2. I forgot about Rule 8. Hopefully OP doesn't really count. Everything else should be fixed. Anyway.